Hello and welcome to Learning Music with Pat. Today I've decided to show you some things about scales and keys. Now I've talked about it some. I've said you check when you're looking at a piece of music to see what key it's in. Well, what does that mean? It basically means how many sharps and how many flats does it have, if it has any at all, and sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. So what I've done is I have shown you on this chart right here what the keys are that recorders usually play in. But of course, sometimes I can fake it and have it do a little bit more than that. But here's the chart that I want you to see. This is the key of C, and you'll notice that the key of C has no sharps and no flats. I start at the low middle C, which is the low C for the woodwinds, and I go up one octave and then back down. Now, if I wanted to, I could go up 2 octaves and then come back down, but just for the sake of showing you, I'm using 1 octave only. And then the key of G that has 1 sharp, or the key of D that has 2 sharps, or the key of F that has 1 flat. And then you can go to 2 flats, but usually recorders don't do 2 flats, but I can do it occasionally, 2 flats. So you have C, G, D, F, and then a B flat if I want to do 2 flats, but I'm not going to do that today. And here's your treble clef, which starts right here. This low C would be the equivalent of this C right here, this C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, and then I start for another octave, but I don't complete it. I only have 3 notes there. I just want to show you this. So if I was to play a diatonic scale, it's just going up or down, or I could start on a high pitch and go down and go back up. This is a simple diatonic scale where you just play one note after another note after another note. Now I'm going to try it on this German recorder, which is a wooden recorder. That last note I played is a low C. That would be this C right here, the low C. And the reason I chose this particular recorder to do it on, which is a nice German recorder, is the fact it only has 1 hole on the bottom. Now, some of the more modern recorders have 2 sets of 2 holes, and if I hold it here, you can see that, I think. I'll point it toward the camera. There is 2 holes down here, and then there's 2 holes right here. So you have 2 sets of 2 holes. Why are they there? They're there to help you play sharps and flats. That's all they're there for. If I only had 1 hole here and 1 hole here, then you could still do the same thing. Now, in the German recorder, it only has 1 hole. There's no set of double holes anywhere. But I think myself, it may be a little easier to get that low C when you've only got 1 hole to work with, rather than if you have 2. If you had 2, you would play the C, and then you could play the C sharp, and then you could play the D, and then you could play the D sharp. But you do that anyway, whether it's a single hole or whether it's a double hole, you can still do that by half holing. So if I play the C, the key of C, and I start on this low C right here, which is actually this one right here, it's kind of a mid-range C, and go down, you see how easy it was for me to pick up that low C. It was very easy for me to pick this up. Now, this is a very nice recorder. It's made out of wood. It's only got that 1 hole, which you probably are not going to be able to see because of the darkness of the color of the instrument. But if I do it on any of these other instruments, say, for example, this red one, you can see that there's a double hole. It's more easy to be seen. And the D is also a double hole. Why? If I want to play the D or the D sharp, or if I want to put my my finger down and cover both those little holes on the bottom, that's going to be the low C. And if I half hole it and just pull my finger off a little, that's going to give me the C sharp. At any rate, what I'm trying to say is that with the C scale, you just go up and down, or any diatonic scale. You only go up and down the scale step by step by step. If you want to do a chromatic scale, then that would be doing it by half steps. So I'm putting in the sharps and I'm putting in the flats. The sharps will go one step up. So if I'm going to do a chromatic scale up the scale, I'm going to add sharps. And if I'm going to do a chromatic scale down the scale, I'm going to add flats. A sharp will pull a note up by 1/2 step. A flat will pull a note down by 1/2 step. It's important to remember that, because when you're playing music and you look at the key signature and it has a flat in it or it has sharps in it, you know that when you play that sharp, you are raising a tone by a 1/2 step. Or if you're playing flats, you're lowering a tone by a 1/2 step. But they're individual notes, but just so that you remember that. So those would be the diatonic scale, one step at a time. By 1/2 steps, that's your chromatic scale. There are other kinds of scale that we usually don't do, but there's a pentatonic scale, which is a scale that Indian instruments play, and it's very beautiful. It doesn't use the same notes as what we use, but it's very beautiful. Then you have a special scale for people who are playing jazz. You know, they have the jazz kind of scale, which is different than other scales. So there are different kinds of scales. But for regular instruments, the chromatic and the diatonic are the scales that we use. So how do you get the keys? The key of G is 1 sharp. The key of C has no sharps and no flats. The key of D has 2 sharps. You can see it there. How do they get there? Well, I'm going to take this down and I'm going to show you some things. So that'll make it clearer, and I'm going to show you how we get them. Let me show you, first of all, a keyboard. Now this has several octaves in it. I stop at that G, but here's the first C would be right here, and that's a whole octave from that C to that C, another octave to this C, and another octave to this C. So we really have 2 or 3 octaves there. I've made this larger so you won't have as many notes, but here's C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's 1 octave. D, E, F, G, A, B, C. That's another octave. So you have 2 octaves on the bottom with 2 or 3 notes to spare in either direction. And these are smaller, but you have about 3 octaves here. So how do you get the C's? And how do you get the sharps? And how do you get the flats? Well, let me put this on. I hope this will decide to stay up on me, and I want to show you something here. I'll just hold it up. This is called, and we're not going to do much work with it, but I want to show it to you. This is called the circle of fifths. The circle of fifths. And in it, you have all of the keys, the sharp keys, the flat keys, they're all on the circle of fifths. But I have an easier way of figuring it out. So I don't use the circle of fifths, but I know that when I was playing in an orchestra, a lot of the piano players was talking about the circle of fifths and finding out a key by the circle of fifths, and you can do that. But I have something easier, and so I'm just going to use my finger here. So supposing you start with C, and you go up 5 steps. So that's going to be C, D, E, F, G. That's 5 steps. I put that C in gray because it's the middle C, and I thought it would just be easier to see. But so C, D, E, F, G. That's a 5th note. And when you have a 5th note, you put in a sharp, and it'll be an F sharp. And then when you start with the G and you go at another 5 steps, and you use the same note that you stopped on as the first step. So it'll be G, A, B, C, D. That's the 5th step. Add another sharp, and then you get 2 sharps. You keep the sharp that you had, and you add 1 more. And then you start at D. That's where you stop, so you're going to start with it again. D, E, F, G, A. That's going to be a 3rd sharp. It's going to be A sharp. It lands on the A, and the A is considered to be sharp. Then you start at the A, B, C, D, E, and that's another sharp. That's a 4th sharp. So already you have a G sharp, and you have a D sharp, and you have an A sharp, and you have an E sharp. That's 4 sharps. And then you have, by the time you get to E, use that as the first note of 5 steps, E, F, G, A, B. That's another sharp. You know, so we're talking about like 5 sharps. B, C, D, E, F. F sharp is like 6 sharps. So I can go all the way up the scale, and every 5th step I add 1 sharp, and the key is named after that sharp. So if we're talking about the G, key of G, which is 1 sharp, C, D, E, F, G, 1 sharp. And the sharp happens to be the F sharp, which is the one right there below it. Then then G, A, B, C, D, and add the 2nd sharp. It's now the key of D with 2 sharps. And every 5 steps, you add another sharp. And you make sure that you start at the key that you landed on for the first key of the next 5. And it goes up 5 by 5 by 5 by 5. If you put that in a graph, if you put that in a circle, that becomes the circle of 5ths. But you can go all the way up and down the scale that way. So I want to show you something else that will make things even clearer as to how these come to be. So here is your C. C to D is 1 step. How do I know that? Well, there's a black key there. So if I went from C to the C sharp, remember the sharp would be a step up, which would be this, and I'm not going to do that. But if I went up that way, that would be a half a step. So we're talking about half steps and full steps. C to D is 1 step. D to E is 1 step. E to F is a half a step. Why is it a half a step? Because there's no black key there. If you wanted a full step, you'd have to go from E to F sharp, because that E to F is a half a step, and the F to the F sharp is another half a step. So if you wanted to go for a full step when you hit the E, you'd have to go to the F sharp. Now, the F sharp to the G is a half step. Or the F to the G is a half step. The G to the A is a full step. The A to the B is a full step. And that B to the C is another half a step. So for every major scale, and they're always done by the same pattern holds for every major scale, you start off with 1 step and a 2nd step, and then the 3rd is a half a step. And then F to G, 1 step, G to A, 1 step, A to B, 1 step, and from the last one, B to C is another half step. So you have 2 steps and a half step. Then you have 3 steps and another half step. And then you've got the scale. And wherever that half step lands, that's the note that's going to be either the sharp or the flat, depending upon whether you're writing in flats or whether you're writing in sharps. So this may seem a little complicated, but I may have here another diagram that will be helpful. Although I'm not sure I brought it. Yeah, here it is. Okay, I want to take this down for a moment. I may put it back up. And I'm going to show you this, okay? C to D, one step. That would be right here. D to E, one step. That's right here. E to F is 1/2 a step because there's no black note there. F to G is a step. G to A is a step. A to B is a step. But that B to the C is a 1/2 step. So you have one step, a 1/2 a step. One step, one step, one step, a 1/2 a step. And every single major scale, no matter how many sharps are in it, has that same pattern. Supposing I'm in the scale and it's in the key of G, which is the first sharp. Okay, so how do I figure it out? I mean, I know what it is, so I don't really have to figure it out. But if I'm in G, G to A would be one step. A to B is one step. And then you need a 1/2 a step. That B to C is a 1/2 a step. Then the C to D is a step. D to E is a step. E to F is your 1/2 step. And then you get from the F to the G, E to F sharp is a step, the full step. And then the last 1/2 step is going to be from that F sharp to that G because that's a 1/2 step there. So let me go through that again. G to A step, A to B step, B to C 1/2 step. So you have your full step, your 1/2 step. C to D is a step. D to E is a step. E to F sharp is a step. Remember, you want 3 steps, and then the last one is a 1/2 a step. So that E to F sharp is a full step. If you go to E to F, it's a 1/2 step, but you don't want a 1/2 step. You need one more full step. So E to F sharp does it. Then the last is a 1/2 a step, and that goes from that F sharp to that G. That's your last 1/2 step. So that pattern, although it seems complicated, is followed. 2 full steps, 1/2 step. 3 full steps, 1/2 step. And that's the full major scale. And then if you use the thing of every 5 steps you add a sharp, or if you're going in the other direction, every 5 steps down you add a flat, you can do the same thing. Flats going down, sharps going up. And so you can always figure out what key you're in or what key you want to be in by using that method. And then if you were to put it, now I wished I'd made this a lot larger, but I didn't, so I don't think you're going to be able to follow this very well. But you can see, like this is the key of C. No sharps, no flats. 5 steps would bring you to G, and I've got G there, and I've got the F sharp there. And then D, I've got the 2 sharps. A, I've got the 3 sharps. E, I've got 4 sharps. And then you have something interesting that goes on the bottom. D flat and C sharp are really the same scale. When you get a lot of flats or you get a lot of sharps, you can turn a sharp scale into a flat scale or a flatted scale into a sharp scale. And you can do it because the notes are enharmonic. And when I say it's enharmonic, I mean a flat is going to can be considered to be a sharp under certain circumstances. And I'll show you this by taking this down. So supposing you have this C, well, what about this note? This is going to be a C sharp. It's the black note right next to the C, and it's a step, 1/2 a step up, so this is going to be a sharp. But if you're playing that D, then you want to go down a 1/2 a step, that note becomes a flat. So this can be either a C sharp or it can be a D flat, depending on what direction you're going. So if you're writing scales and you have a lot of sharps or you have a lot of flats, one can turn into the other. If you see this E right here, this is going to be an F. If you want, or it can be an E sharp because it's 1/2 step up from the E. So this would either be an F, or you could consider it to be an E sharp, 1/2 step up that's sharp. It really doesn't make any difference, but when you're working with an enharmonic note, the tone is going to be the same. If I play this as a C flat, here's your C right here, and if I play this note, it can be a C flat. And it's going to be the same thing as a B, because that B is 1/2 step down, but this C flat 1/2 step down is a B, so you could consider it either a C flat or a B, but the tone is going to be the same. And it's just a matter of how you're going to write it, what you want. And it does work every time. So if you're not sure as to where we come from in terms of flats and sharps, you can always use the method that I taught you before. If you're starting at a C right here, and you do 1 step, 1 step, and then a 1/2 step, then 1 step, 1 step, 1 step, a 1/2 step, you're going to get the scale, you're going to get the major scale, and the 1/2 step, where it ever lands, is going to be your flat or it's going to be your sharp, depending upon whether you're raising it or whether you're lowering it. Now, I hope this doesn't get to be too complicated for you, but that's what it is. And if you can use that and use that method, you can arrange to say, well, say I want 4 sharps, how do I do it? Well, I raise it from C. You always start with this middle C right here. I go 5 steps a G. I go 5 steps a D. I go 5 steps in A. I go another 5 steps in E. There's your 4th sharp. It'll land on that E. So that's the way you figure out the sharps and the flats. And if you want to just try it, take a keyboard, any kind of a keyboard, one that's drawn with a poster or a real one, and then just try it. And you'll be able to find every 5 steps you add a sharp if you're going to use sharp fingerings. And that's the way you get your sharps and your scales of sharps. Now, the recorders can't play all of them, but the recorders can play a lot of them. They can play the most of them. And so therefore, we have, like, for example, that I showed you to begin with, we have, you know, the C, D, 2 sharps, and going on, you know, 3 sharps, 4 sharps. We usually play either in the key of G, a C, G, or D, or if you're going down by flats, the key of F, and sometimes B flat we can play. But there's a lot of music written in those keys, so it's not a hard thing to do. You just kind of have to learn the mechanics of it. So we're almost out of time. I'm going to close it here. We'll be doing some music next time. Please join me then.